It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind. It either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Gia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hey, this is Dan from Cayuga, New York, and you're listening to the best podcast in all the land, Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you. We're going to be chatting with Donna. And Donna actually comes to us from the New England area. She had an encounter back in 1984, almost 38 years ago. And as her and I were talking about her encounter, she was saying, something really weird happened in the encounter. And I really haven't told very many people about this because when I did, people laughed. And so I've been pretty silent on what happened to me back in 1984. And so Donna's very nervous. She wrote down the encounter and I told her, you really don't have to do that. And she said, well, when you become my age, Wes, you're going to write things down. Otherwise, you're going to forget. And so she's comfortable doing it that way. I told her that was fine. And, what else do you say besides yes, ma'am? You know what I mean? What else am I going to say? But she's a very sweet lady, and I can't wait to hear about the encounter. Back from Texas, when I was in Texas last week, I went down there originally to help Randy White and Ed Too Tall Jones from the Dallas Cowboys. They're absolutely NFL legends, and had a great time with those guys. I also met with the developer while I was down there. I have a Sasquatch Chronicles app coming for the members, and I've been messing around with it. I like it a lot. There's been a few things that I want fixed, so I sent that back to the developer, asked him if he would fix it, and when I get it back, I'm going to send it out to a handful of members and ask them to try and break it. Do everything you can to break this app, and tell me if there's anything wrong with it. It's basically what I want to know. And once I get that done, I will send it out to all of the members, and it runs everything you can do on the website. You can basically do in the app. It's very, very cool, and it's been a long time coming. I can't wait to officially release it. When I was down there with Randy and Ed, I got to thinking, how cool would it be if I did another show? And so I've actually been working on additional content for the website. It's mainly going to be for the members, but I'll probably release some out to the public. But I'm calling it Chronicles After Dark, and we're going to talk about giants, we're going to talk about ancient history, other cryptids, just weird mysteries, and also Sasquatch. But we can interact live. I can pull people into the show, online with me in video. We can chat. Going to do a lot of cool things with it. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out SasquatchChronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Donna to the show. Donna, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Donna, and I really appreciate you being here. And I know you're nervous. There's really no reason to be nervous. But again, I know you have your notes, and I can appreciate that. This happened to you over 38 years ago, or almost 38 years ago, and it was very traumatizing. If you would you just start from the beginning? Kind of tell us what you were doing and what happened.
Okay, I'll do my best. I lived in a small hill town in Western Mass, and I would travel from the house to Route 23 down the mountain every day around 4:30 a.m. for work. Down the mountain every day, I would see different animals come into my headlights, like the raccoons that cover their eyes, and deer, ermine, fox, and just different smaller animals, I guess. I would notice as I approached them that their eye shine was from my headlights. And I traveled further down the road, going towards Russell, Massachusetts. And I noticed to my left, there was two large, bright red eyes. They were further apart compared to the other creatures that I was used to seeing. I wanted to see what this creature was. So I stopped my car. Dickinson Hill Road is to my left, and that road travels under the Massachusetts Turnpike. Next to Dickinson Hill Road, there was a small hill where I saw the red eyes on top of that hill, and they were in the very darkest of shadows. Within a minute or so, the creature stepped into the lights of my car. I'm reliving this again. The instant fear was almost unbearable, but not so much. It came over my body as he came into the lights of my car. And I watched it come down this hill sideways, right foot in front of left foot. As he did this, he would have amounts of dirt kick up under his foot, up the side of his foot. So either the dirt was not so firm at the time, or he was that heavy. I think it was the latter. Now, when he came into my headlights, I could see how big he was. And I was totally fascinated by the muscle structure, especially in his legs, because it would have a ripple effect down his side. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was about 8 feet tall. His body was large. Now, my eyes were fixed on the muscle structure, like I said, under his hair, which rippled down his side. I knew he was coming towards me. The panic, the worry about this creature being able to pull my car door off with no problem was really terrifying for me. Oh, I said to myself, my God, why did I have to stop my car to see this? Who will believe me? And I figured at that point, no one. So I watched him eye-to-eye contact as he reached the side of the road. And I thought he was probably about 20 feet away from my car. So his angle changed a little bit to where I didn't think he was coming at my car. You know, I thought maybe he would cross the road there, or I could go on my way, or, 1,000 things. And then something happened. I I had a loss of time. Not a very long time at all, but that loss of time brought him to the front left of my car. So the fear was starting to come back. I mean, I don't know. It was that fear that was there. But my son thinks I might have had what you call an adrenaline dump or something of that nature. And he moved so slowly, so that could have been a part of that too. I'm not sure. But as he came and started walking across my car, and he entered the middle of my car, something else happened. His face appeared to me right in front of my windshield, like inches from my windshield. I could see his face, and I could see vivid detail. He was very gorilla looking. He had a round head. It wasn't conical. He had, at this point, black eyes, and they had a white around the black pupils that had kind of like a swirl in them. I couldn't figure that out. He had his eyes were deep inside, but his forehead wasn't that protruded. He had, his nose was smaller. His mouth looked like it went from almost to the ear to ear. He never showed me any teeth, and so I don't know what those looked like. But that black skin was so smooth, and I can still see him right in front of me. He had absolutely no hair on his face. The hair on his head came down to his shoulders. He was it could have been maybe 3 or 4 inches long to his shoulders, but this was all I could see up at my windshield. And, whoa. When something else happened, and I don't know if you call it mind speak or what, but he told me, "I'm not going to hurt you." And I nodded, and I had a smile. And then he grinned at me, still no teeth showing. And he slowly started walking across my car and into the other side of the road and into some sapling trees. And what amazed me about the sapling trees was he never lifted his arms or his hands to cover his face. And they were taller than he was and good size saplings. And he never protected his face. I couldn't get over that. But he ended up walking through them and across a creek and up into the woods. I wished I knew then what I know now, because on the other side of my car, on the edge of the road, there was a big sand pile left over from the winter snow stuff that they used to get people stuck out of the gutters and stuff. And there should have been some awesome prints there, as well as on the hill. You know, I could have taken, well, not pictures because I didn't have a cell phone. I don't know. I wished I knew what I knew then. Now what I knew. And that does it for my Bigfoot.
That is an amazing account. The mind speak thing, you know, I used to kind of balk at it a little bit, but I don't really balk at it anymore. I've never actually had it happen to me, but I've heard it time and time again. Do you know who Les Stroud is, Donna?
Yes, I do. I used to watch Survivor Man, and I know he talked about it on one of your shows.
Yeah, on episode 500, he talked about it, and I was shocked when he told me that. But what's amazing, though, is even hunters, hardcore country boys,
That's my favorite.
yeah, have told me, yeah, they're my favorite people, too. But have told me, something was talking to me, and I would ask them, well, what do you mean something was talking to you? And they would say it was like a voice, and it was kind of in the back of my head. It wasn't my voice, because I thought, well, maybe, sometimes when we get afraid, the inner voice goes, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here. And I wondered, well, is it that? But I'm convinced everyone I talk to, it's not that. The scary part about Sasquatch doing this is I can only think of two other genres of strange things that happen on this planet where that happens. One is with aliens. You'll hear a lot of people who get abducted by aliens talk about the way they speak, and it's not through their mouth. I interviewed Travis Walton, and he communicated with one of them, and he said it never opened its mouth, but he understood what it was saying, and he was talking back to it. And the other one is with sometimes in a lot of demonic encounters, you'll hear that, and I find it odd with Sasquatch that goes on. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was about the eye shine that you saw. Was it, I know you were kind of describing it as pretty dark out, and then you saw these red eyes, and you grew up in the country. Was it eye shine that you were seeing, or what were they glowing?
Well, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because they were very bright, is how I'm going to explain that. I'm not sure. They had to be glowing for me to see them, as dark as it was up on that hill. I'm not sure. That was one of the questions I had for you. But on the back side of what you were telling me, I heard every one of those episodes that you were talking about. And one of the things that was on my mind was that I heard that episode where that guy had told you, not Les Stroud, but another guy that had told you he was spoken to, he had made the remark that it wasn't his voice. And after all these years, a light bulb went off in my head. That wasn't my voice. It was deeper, and as you said, it was in the back of my mind. It wasn't like it was in my forehead, But those were two of the questions I had for you. But, as he got to the middle of my car and I saw his face, his eyes were black. So what do you think that was?
Yeah, the red eyes is strange. The red eyes are very, very strange. I know red hunting lights, a lot of hunters will use red light, and it provides, it locates animals better. Basically, it amplifies the eye shine if you use a red light. The red eyes is very strange that people are seeing. And I'm not so sure I can answer your question, but how far away from you was this creature when he saw the red eyes?
All right, he had to be, 20 feet plus the hill, which was probably where he was at least another 20 feet, if not more. He was in the trees. He was, now we know he was standing there. So maybe 35, 40 feet, I'm guessing now.
Yeah, and that's pretty far to see eye shine unless you're shining a light right on.
Exactly.
Even a deer, I don't know that it would give off eye shine unless you were right on top of it, shining it with a light,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they could have been glowing. It's hard to say. I know, especially back in 1984, we don't think of glowing eyes, but a lot of people did experience it, and they kept quiet about it over the years, kind of like what you did, Donna, because no one wants to be made fun of. I don't care how much you say, I don't care what people think of me. As human beings, we don't want people to think we're crazy, Yeah,
well, I feel good about this today. Back then, that's how I felt. I don't care who doesn't believe me anymore. I'm 75. I don't know how much longer I have to go. So Yeah. Yep. You're right.
Yeah, and I think that's why. I think a lot of people they don't want to be made fun of, and I've spoken to many eyewitnesses, and they will describe eye shine, nothing more, nothing less. However, I've spoken to many eyewitnesses, and they're seeing eyes glowing, not eye shine. They're seeing eyes glowing. And I'm talking about, people like you and me, Donna. You grew up country, and the deer. For the most part the animals out there, and you've seen eye shine a million times. And those people will say it wasn't eye shine; the eyes were glowing. And that's the weird part about Sasquatch is you would think it would be one way or the other. Some people, out in the city, go out in the country, and they see red eyes, and they were like, "Oh, it's glowing red eyes." Your average person might go, "Well, that's eye shine." A lot of people I've spoken to, they know eye shine very well. They see it every night. How you were describing, driving home, you see these different animals. They see it every night. They know eye shine, and they'll say the eyes were glowing. I want to ask you a couple questions.
Okay.
Tell me about the missing time. I'm fascinated by that portion. Did you look down at the clock and realized a bunch of time?
No, I had nothing. No cell phone, no watch on, no nothing I was pretty ritual every day. I knew where I was going and about the time it was, but I don't think it was very long. How long would it take him to go from 20 feet to 10 feet? It was that long. And at this point, we don't know how fast he traveled because I don't have a recollection of that.
Well, the part I'm trying to understand is the missing time. Was it you saw him at 20 or 30 feet, and then all of a sudden he's at your window?
At the left headlight of my car.
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of that. A lot of times when you have adrenaline or there's an adrenaline dump, think about it in terms everyone can understand. We've all been in car accidents, or maybe it's just me. But when you're in a car accident, everything tends to slow down, but you're very aware of what's going on. I'll give you an example, Don. I hate to talk about my encounter because I try and make it about the guest, but my encounter should have taken 20 minutes tops. We were there for hours, and I can't I could tell you exactly from one moment to the next what happened. What I can't explain is how so much time had went by. Even when we were coming down the mountain, we were arguing about, I told him his clock's wrong. His clock's way off. Mm-hmm. And I have no explanation for something that realistically took 20 minutes. We were there for hours.
Yeah. No, this is exactly what my son tells me. You would love my son. My son had his own sighting back in Oklahoma. He lives in Oklahoma, a town called Bayan. He had his sighting, and he can also add, this is what I wanted to say about the Cobble Mountain critter, of which I believe I saw. This was my Bigfoot. And they named him the Cobble Mountain Critter in 1950. A guy had a photo. I'm not sure who this guy is. But I also, a few years after I saw my Bigfoot, I was at the general store of the town I lived in. And I had told the owner, there was a rag magazine that had a picture of Bigfoot on it. And in fact, since all the pictures I've seen, he don't look like that either. I said, he doesn't look like that. And I was adamant and almost angry about it, but I hadn't told hardly anybody. I told a friend, I told family who all thought I was going nuts. And he brought out from behind the counter a picture that his cousin Joey had taken of the Cobble Mountain Critter at the Reservoirs Dam area. And I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And further than that, I need to know, there has been sightings of a white Bigfoot in that area. Are they born white or do they grow with age white?
And this is my opinion, because I always
Okay.
say I don't have one in my garage I'm studying, so I can't
Yeah.
tell you like absolutes.
I've heard.
But I think some are born white, and I'll tell you why. There has been many accounts where people will run into one and it's white or it's gray, and I'll ask them, was it do you think in your impression, do you think it was an older creature? And a lot of them will say no. This looked like a young one. They're describing something 5 foot something running around, jumping around. So it's not so much, like we as humans, as we grow older, we get gray hair. I don't think it's that. I think a lot of them, not a lot of them, but probably more than most people think. There is white and light gray ones there. And when you talk to eyewitnesses, the other thing you'll pick up on is I'll ask them about a certain creature that they run into, and they'll say, well, it kind of had gray hair, gray in it, kind of in its beard. And I'll ask them, well, do you think that was just a color? And what they'll say is it reminded them of, when we get older, we get, gray hairs in our beard. And that's kind of, so to answer your question, my opinion is I think most of them are born that way.
You did, but I don't hear of them having any albino features like pink eyes or that deep. I haven't heard that. But you answered my question, because even if there was only one chance that would happen, that means that could have been my Bigfoot, and I miss him. I mean, I haven't had many days in my lifetime that I didn't think of him. And, it made me feel better to hear you say that, because I'm going to think of him. That was my Bigfoot. And it was my brother that saw this white, whom I don't speak with anymore. But he told my son the story behind seeing this white Bigfoot.
People run into white more than most people think. You'd think it'd be something uncommon. The other thing you brought up about the eyes, people who are really close to them will describe a black eye. And I know the black eye threw you off because you saw a reflection of red eyes. But I'll ask people, what's that white part of your eye called?
Yeah, it's around the pupil.
Yeah, well, the around there, I'll ask people, is it white? And most people will say no. It kind of reminded them of someone who had jaundice. It was kind of a yellowish, murky. It wasn't white like our eyes.
Yeah, well, this did have its white, and it was round and right at the edge of the black eye. But I did see some either light gray or swirls in it, and even some maybe darker tan also swirling in that area. You got me.
Every encounter, that's why, you can't take one encounter and then base your opinion off of that encounter, because there's so many. I've talked to people, on the East Coast, and they'll say it looked very human-like. Reminded me of a Native American is really what it reminded me of. The features were a little different. I mean, obviously the nose is different, and then you talk to some people and they'll say it reminded me of a gorilla. You hear that a lot in the Pacific Northwest. Reminded me of a gorilla, but the nose was human-like. It was flat, but it was very human. It was a hooded nose. And it's strange when you get down to the South, a lot of people will say it reminded them of a chimpanzee, except for the nose. And I've often wondered if there was different types of it, but I'm careful not to say too much like that now, because people take and run with it like it's gospel, and it's really nothing more than a theory. When he walked up and he was looking at you, before he smiled back at you, and when he said, "I'm not going to harm you," prior to that, did his expression change at all?
He never gave me an expression of fear other than his size and the unknown. But his facial expressions were mellow. They seemed to be kinder than I expected. I mean, I expected this big hairy creature to tear my door off, and yet what I'm seeing in front of me, I see none of that in him especially at the windshield. I mean, from the left of my car to the windshield or whatever. Even as he left, he never took his eyes off me. And I know I made a mistake. I never took my eyes off him, but you know what? I'm glad I didn't.
It's one of those moments, and I think it, for a lot of people, not so much realizing that these creatures are real. I think for a lot of people, and you might have gone through this, Donna, back in 1984, you start to look around at, there was things where I was like, oh, come on, that's not real. And after you have an encounter, all of a sudden you stop and go, well, that might be real. I mean, who am I to judge? I just saw this, 8-foot tall, 9-foot tall ape running around the woods. Who am I? So it kind of opened your mind to other things that might be real.
Yeah, I know. My first impression was, holy shit.
Yeah, that would be mine. Well, let me ask you this. That day, I realized 1984, Bigfoot's in our vocabulary. But that day, what did you know you ran into Bigfoot, or what did you think you actually ran into?
My son tells me I saw the Patterson Gremlin film, but he also told me I watched with the kids the Leonard Nimoy In Search Of thing. I can't recall any of that, but just that alone, at this time, seeing him, it never came into my mind that he was a Bigfoot, or that didn't click till much later. When I was hearing more, because I started looking up more things. I didn't know about your podcast back then, but my sons and my husband and my daughter-in-law all wrote for a magazine called Woods and Waters USA. I don't know if you ever saw that. It was national. This is back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And Frank Sousa, who was the chief editor of the magazine, wrote an article on the Cobble Mountain critters. So I had that to read. And I went frantic because he also said in that article that the University of Massachusetts Amherst did a study on the Cobble Mountain critter. Well, I tried and tried and tried. I could not get anybody to answer a phone there. I tried the anthropology department, the main number. No one would give me a call back. They were all, leave me a message. And so I was really at a loss for not having enough information in front of me to deal with what I saw. But as I got into that part of it, it was like, oh, there's a tidbit of information for me, I got to gather this. I have it somewhere, and I've been looking frantically for it. And I know it's in my attic. We just recently moved a year and a half ago to where we are in Little River. So, it all keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. And of course, now I know what I saw. But at the time, I never gave that a thought. Who would ever think it would be in my world, in my time? We didn't have internet or any of that stuff back then. At least I didn't. And I don't know when that came about, to be honest, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, well, it didn't really come out. Well, anyway, it's irrelevant about the internet. I want to ask you about when you saw the creature today, looking at what you saw and then looking at the Patterson Gimlin film. How would you, obviously, I'm assuming what you saw didn't have breasts, but what was the differences between what you saw and what everyone knows as a Patterson Gimlin film?
He was different. He was different. I think he was broader. I'm trying to picture Patty now. She was very tall. She was over 8 feet that I thought mine was. Of course, no breast. The stride was a little different in that she seemed to move quicker. Yeah, because mine was very slow. My whole encounter was very slow, as it seems. But he had a thicker hair, and the muscle structure I could see much more clearly than with Patty. So I don't know. That's.
Yeah, and I appreciate you answering it, Donna. It's one of those things I like to ask people because, we've all seen the Patterson-Gimlin film, and most eyewitnesses I talk to, they'll say that's not what they saw. Before we get into the strange object that you saw in the sky, I'm curious, what do you think Sasquatch is?
I think I have an opinion as to, I believe he's flesh and blood from the different things I've heard and how he's been shot. I believe the government has bodies, absolutely. I believe they're a part of it. But I believe being flesh and blood, he's also something more. That dimensional stuff and all the other stuff you hear about with him, it's too overwhelming and too many witnesses to not, to deny it anyways. I couldn't.
I agree with you. There's too much going on there. There's something, and I've said it a different way. There's something odd about these creatures. Something's not quite right. What's your quick take on the mind speak? I mean, what's your opinion of that? Do you think that is something evil, or do you think that is something, obviously we can't do that I'm aware of. What do you honestly think of that mind speak?
Well, for me, I believe they do it. I mean, they have that ability. I mean, they have powers we just haven't even scratched the top of yet. So, yeah, I believe that comes into play with their additional abilities.
Does it concern you at all that a lot of you, and I don't know what your feelings on UFO or demons or any of the other stuff is, but does it concern you at all that when you hear a lot of, because I listen to a lot of weird stuff and I read, and I know a lot of really useless information. But when you hear that across the board with most alien encounters, and you hear that not all, but some demonic encounters, do you think there's a relation between the three?
Well, if you believe all the witness accounts, I guess there's that possibility. I've never had that kind of an encounter where I could judge demons or demonic. I've never seen, a dog man or anything like that. And my UFO that I saw was 50 feet in front of me, but it looked like a big white ball of light until it started to take off.
And I want to get into that about the UFO. And I think a lot of people, they listen to me and I think Bigfoot's a demon. I don't believe it's a demon. But I do think it's important when you look at other genres to go, well, wait a minute. I heard this over here. Why is this strange? Why are they talking about this over here? And why are they talking about this? And it might be just more or less coincidences, but I think it's good to kind of question everything. Tell me about the UFO encounter. Now, I know it happened in Massachusetts. How much later in life did this happen from 1984? And if you would, just walk us into it.
Okay, this was prior to my 84. I'm going to say around August of 1965. I had my sister babysit for me, and I had lived in Connecticut at the time. And she lived with my mother in Massachusetts. I had to leave our house and go through Suffield, Connecticut, and out onto Southwick. Here, there's a mountain you have to go to. And I had to stop, well, you'd probably call it a hill. but I had to stop my car at a green light prior to going up the mountain. And I was just, passing the time when I noticed this bright light came about across my windshield. And I had a good-sized windshield in that car. It was a Starliner. And it came across my windshield. And I said, quick, with the other two girls that were with me. I said, make a wish. That's a fallen star. Well, I no sooner said that, and it went right back up the same way it came. And I went, holy crap, what was that? And my sister-in-law at the time was going, oh, my God, Raymond, you don't believe me, because she spoke broken English. She's French-Canadian. And my sister, who was in denial over this episode, wouldn't even talk about it. But we got to the other side of the mountain, and as we started coming down, there was a very bright light facing us that was just above an irrigation ditch and a farmhouse that had lots of windows, so it was lit up like daylight. I can see this so clearly. And we had to go to the bottom. There was no place to turn around. I couldn't go back. I had to go forward down, and there was a very sharp left-hand curve that I had to take in front of this when I was 50 feet away from it. And I kept watching in my windshield, and I kept saying to God, please get me to my mom's, please get me to my mom's. My firstborn daughter was in the back seat of my car, and I worried about, are they going to take her? I mean, I automatically assumed it was alien, of course, and we lived right near an airport and an Air Force base and that kind of thing. So I didn't know, then what I know now, but as we went around this corner, I kept looking in my rear view mirror to see where it was. Is it still there? That kind of thing. And it started to go up. But when it started going up, it took the shape of like a rocket. I don't know if it was cigar shaped in the end or whatever, but it started following us. And I got to the Congamon Lakes, which was the go between Connecticut and Massachusetts, and I saw it just go away. It just beamed itself up Scotty, you know what I'm saying? It just was gone. I wouldn't go back around that mountain, and I had to travel that to get to my mom's house. I went better than 30 miles, I believe, around this mountain to get back into Connecticut. So it frightened me. It did frighten me. Then again, it was the unknown that frightened me. And I didn't want to wait around to see what was going to come out of that, or if it was going to do anything else to us or anything like that. It was a quick encounter.
I don't blame you for it. I mean, obviously it terrified you if you're driving an extra 30 miles to get around it. Did the craft have any sort of shape to it? I mean, could you tell it was like something beyond just a light, or was it just kind of a ball of light?
Well, it was the ball of light as it was landing or coming to land, and then it was like a rocket when it was leaving. So your guess is probably as good as mine.
What color do you think it was, Donna?
It was bright, bright white. I mean, at that time, we didn't have lights that bright. And I kept looking for something that I could see that would show other people how bright it was. And I couldn't find anything. Today, I don't know, what is it, our halogen lights or something that are that, maybe not quite, but that bright, as close as I could get to it. So, I don't know. I believe it was not from our world because of the way it traveled. At the point, I didn't think it was government. It just moved too fast. it was here and gone in seconds. I mean, it was not even seconds when it came across the windshield and right back the same way it came. And yeah, the speed was too great to be anything we have even today, I believe.
How big do you think it was before it went into that different shape? Which is weird. I've heard that before, but how big do you think it was as a ball?
As a ball. Well, it was as big as the farmhouse, which was double stories with windows. God, what do I have to compare it to? Well, if he was 50 feet in front of me, then, well, the saucer or whatever, then it had to be at least, I'm going to say at least that large.
Yeah, and so for the audience, we're not talking about like a tennis ball. We're talking about something
Oh,
huge.
no. Oh, yes, this was definitely huge. Not huge, because I know I have a friend who had an encounter where it came down and she could see windows and they could actually see something walking around the windows and that kind of thing. I don't think it was that huge. I think maybe a smaller version of what she saw, but 50 feet to, I'll say 40 to 50 feet. That's as best as I can do.
The thing's huge, and it amazes me. I've heard that before. I've heard where eyewitnesses have told me it was a ball of light, and it almost like changed shapes, and in a blink, it was gone.
Really, what kind of shapes? What kind of shapes did they take?
Kind of like what you're describing, Donna. They'll describe it going from a circular shape to almost like a cylinder, and it'll shoot up in the sky, and in a blink, it's gone. In my opinion, I think there's almost two separate types of lights. People, and it's mainly size. People will talk about a very large. I had a state trooper one time tell me about this ball of light he almost hit, and I asked him how big it was, and he said it was about the size of a Volkswagen. But I would say most of the time people talk about the lights being very small. One thing you'll find when you talk to people is the light is different. In the bigger objects, they'll describe it as being a bright light, almost kind of blinding. In the smaller lights, they'll describe it as more of a soft light. But a lot of people, it's strange. How do you really come out and talk about seeing a ball of light flying through the air? And I know, I really do appreciate you taking the time to share everything that happened to you in your life. If you would, I know you've seen the smaller lights. Tell us about it.
The lights came into play when I moved to, well, I'm not sure about this, but I can remember going back in the early 80s to Oklahoma for a visit. And I had taken pictures of us coming upon the Mississippi River Bridge. I'm sure you've been there, right?
I've heard of it. I've never been there.
Well, I've taken pictures of that. And, actually, we got married that weekend, so I was taking all kinds of pictures. Well, when I got home and showed those pictures, my brother saw a ball of light, maybe the size of a tennis ball, coming down across that bridge. And I have two pictures that I had taken that show the distance it traveled downwards. So I don't know if it started there or not. But when I moved from Massachusetts to the Columbia area of South Carolina, we lived on a lake called Lake Murray. And we used to sit out on the back porch watching the lake and having our coffee or tea, my husband did. All of a sudden, I turned to look at my neighbor's yard to see if she was up. And here was the biggest ball of light I saw. It was bigger than an exercise ball, maybe even, It was bigger. It was bigger than an exercise ball. And it came through our yards and went towards the lake. And I said to my husband, did you see that? Did you see that? Because I didn't know what that was then. And he said, see what? And I'm like, oh, this is my husband. He never sees anything until we see the lights here. And then I said, before I could say, oh, brother, I'm looking back, and here comes the ball of light back again. But I never saw it go out into the lake, and I never saw it go out the other side to the other side of the lake. It was just there and gone, I guess. Then we moved off the lake eventually. It got to be too noisy, and we bought a house that was kind of in the woods on a dirt road, and we had a huge yard. We had boats, we had things to store, so we put up all kinds of garages and that kind of thing. I was sitting out on the back porch. Of course, I got to say this before I can do that. As I was sitting out on the front porch, I heard this loud grunt that ended in a higher pitched tone. Like almost like an elk, but not as long. And after I heard that, or I flew in the house, I was like, holy crap, what was that? Here I go again, kind of deal, And I don't want to see this. I don't want to know any more about this than I know already. So I flew in the house and I said, oh my God, I just heard this grunt. It was so loud. And of course, no one believed me, so I left it at that. A couple of days later, I had a ball of light come to my front porch just on the other side of a railing from where I was sitting. And I went, oh my God, what are you? What have we got here, And you couldn't see through it. It was bright, but you couldn't see through it. And it had stuff in the middle of it. That's why you couldn't see through it. And it was just staying there. It wasn't going anywhere. So I said, okay. So I got up and I walked over to where my porch stairs were. And it came that distance, which wasn't very much. It was probably, I don't know, 7 feet the most, if that, maybe 6 feet. I started to walk down my steps to get closer to it, and it backed off. Like, I almost instantly understood, no, don't get close. And I said, okay, and I just watched it, and it went around to the back side of my house, on the opposite side from which it came. And I ran through the house again to see, where is it going? Where is it going? I want to know more. And at the beginning of we had a big garden. And at the beginning of our garden, where the fence post was in the corner, it was there. I saw it there. But then it just blinked out. It just blinked out. It was like, is it still there and I can't see it, or did it go somewhere? I don't have the answer. Of course, I told everybody, well, of course, nobody believes me again. And then it came back. It came back the next night. And I relived this all over again. The same scenario, other than I didn't go down my porch step to get closer to it. And my son saw it. My son Lee, who lives in South Carolina. And he went, oh, and went through the house and went to see where it ended. Same scenario. It just blinked out. Most recently, there were balls of lights reported in Chapin, South Carolina, by one of the news people. And I asked my girlfriend, did she see them or did she hear of them? And she said, no. Are you serious? I said, yeah. And to this day, I'm not sure my son Lee was pulling my leg or whatever, but him and his buddy who had come down from Massachusetts to live in South Carolina. So they were staying at my house. They were coming home from being out one night, and they got to a place on the way home where there was a side street and the main road. And they told me that they just saw something they couldn't believe. And it was a big, bright light. They didn't know if a transformer had blown up or what was going on. He says he's not kidding me. And I want to believe him, but I'm not sure. I'm really not sure on that one.
Was the light color that you saw this time around, was it the same as the color anyway, back in 1965?
No, it was duller. It was very dull light, actually. I mean, it seemed brighter inside, but it was really not bright on the outside as much. And each one I saw was the same one. So, I mean, it didn't change colors on me, and it looked exactly the same. I relived it, like step for step, except, like I said, for not getting close.
Yeah, it makes me think maybe there is a difference between the balls of light people are seeing and like what you saw in 1965. A lot of people, even the light that I saw, I wouldn't say it was bright. It wasn't really a bright light. It was very soft, kind of a pretty light, really, kind of soft on the eyes. You know, there might be one in the same, but the smaller ones, people describe them more as, a soft light, a pretty light. What do you think the lights are, Donna? I mean, I realize you don't know and I don't know, but I'm curious on your opinion.
Well, I don't think they're from us. They can do things I've never seen done, so I think do I think they're spirits? Is that what you think, maybe? Or I'd like to believe. My husband's part Cherokee, and he actually just got his birth certificate onto the scrolls, so he had enough in him to do that. Sometimes, not always, but I'd like to think of them as the Indians do, because I do think they're special. But do I know if they're a spirit? Gosh, I don't know. And of course, we don't know. I just think, I don't think they're from here. I think that's another thing that comes from another, dimension or outer space or something like that. I can't decide. It's back and forth all the time with me.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. And it depends on what Native American tribe you talk to. Most of the natives I've talked to, they'll say they're evil spirits and stay away from them. A lot of them will call them water spirits because you'll find them near waterways. And then there is other Native American tribes that view them in a positive light. I guess it's like anything else, your experience with something is how you're going to view it. Going back to even like your Bigfoot encounter, thank God that he wasn't aggressive. And if people don't understand the fear when you run into something and you see something as big as they are, when you talked about, well, this thing could rip my door off and there's nothing really I could do about it. I know exactly what you mean. In my encounter, I thought for sure this thing could flip this SUV over with two large men in it, and there's nothing we could do about it. And I think that's really, and then if they get aggressive on top of you're already afraid, it escalates everything, because your adrenaline's pumping and you're trying to stay alive. There is weird cases to where many, many cases, not just a few, of people describing this mind speak. And there's a lot of weird cases with Sasquatch to where you're like, that couldn't happen. But in reality, Sasquatch shouldn't exist. If people think it's nothing more than Gigantopithecus that we just haven't caught up with, coincidentally, humans have caught up with everything. We've killed everything and we've put them in cages. And yet we can't catch up with this thing. It really makes me wonder. So to hear some of the weird stuff that goes on, if it's one person saying, oh, I heard mind speak, you could go, well, that might be a schizophrenic you're talking to. But when you hear thousands of people say, I heard it speak to me, Most people never heard a mind speak, but they'll go, I heard it speak to me in my head. I heard it. That tells me there's something going on. Something's not quite right here. But thank God the one you ran across wasn't aggressive, you know?
Well, you know what? Thank God it took this long to hear you say that. You know what I'm saying? Because other than that, I wouldn't been able to explain that mind speak, you know? And listening to the podcast, that guy, I mean, he just left this impression in my mind. You're right. Like this big light bulb went off, you know, a flashback to my UFOs. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of strange and odd mysteries to our world, Donna. And, you know, Sasquatch is weird enough. Really, Sasquatch should not exist. But you can't, you know, half the eyewitnesses will describe running into an animal, a creature, and it seems to be doing stuff that is very animalistic-like. And in other cases, they're describing bizarre things, you know, from glowing eyes to hearing, I heard it talking in my head, just weird things. The people who describe it being very animalistic are very consistent. The people who have these other encounters with it are very, very consistent. And so something's not right. Something's going on here. So, you know, and sometimes people will say, you know, well, I look at it, I can't go down that road. You know, I'm a scientist, and you know, there's no way I'm going to discuss anything odd or strange. Most of those people have experienced ghosts too, or demonic encounters. Explain to me invisible entity, the boogeyman that is, you know, torments people. Is that made up? How do you explain that? So there's so many weird things that we can't explain, but it helps when people come forward because it gives us an idea of what we're dealing with. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on the show and share what happened to you.
I enjoyed you so much. It was a blessing. You really got to know that it was a blessing.
Thank you again for the kind of words, Donna. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Until next time, everyone.
My wheels unturned to go alone. Baby, you should know that I'm gone. With the lights on, this is my home. Place where I own memories of you, dear. And in your eyes, close at the skies, I'll mesmerize the memories of you, dear. I saw a moon as a human and lighter, and its power grew wider. So I put my speed a little wiser, to in something quieter. With the lights on, this is my home. Place where I own memories of you, dear. And in your eyes, close at the skies, I'll mesmerize the memories of you, dear. The lights on, this is my